It's a good day, but not for my beard. I'm having a bad beard day. It's very frizzy. Why am I getting a new lens? Well, I have been rocking, you may or may not know, a 20mm f1.8 prime lens on this camera, my A7S III, since I got it. A good friend of mine invited me to work with him on creating content for his and his brother's car importing and resale business. And I absolutely jumped on the opportunity for that because one of the issues with starting a car-related blog or vlog or an automotive journalism type thing is I don't have access to anything and I don't have any clout to do anything. So this was like not only a no-brainer, but like exactly what I've been asking for. To stop rambling so much, I realized that I'm going to need a lens that has a bit deeper of a focal length than just a 20mm. There's certain shots you absolutely should and can get with a wide angle lens, but you can't get everything. There are certain times where you want that compression. And also, and this is something I'm going to talk about a little bit more, the depth of field being shallow is not necessarily always the best thing. Now you watching might think, well, duh, but for me, that's a revelation. That's totally new for me, and I'm learning it by experience. So I collected a list of lenses that I considered to be a potential, and I was thinking about the 24 to 70 range. So there is the Sony G Master 24 to 70, I think way too expensive. Then there's the Sigma 24 to 70 f2.8, and then there's the Tamron 28 to 75. And then there's also the Sony G 24 to 105, and each of them has their pluses and their minuses. So it then came down to the Tamron 2875 f2.8, the Sigma 24 to 70 f2.8, and the Sony 24 to 105 f4. And you can decide on which lens you might want to get based on a number of factors: the functionality, the price, the build quality, the clarity, all these different things. For me, it's functionality and price, and then also build quality, depending on how variable that build quality is. But as I was doing this research, I then came across something that, if you're into looking at these lenses for Sony cameras, you may have heard of: the Tamron 35 to 150 f2 to 2.8. Now, before I get to that one, I'm going to mention the general thoughts that I had on the other ones aside from the Tamron. And to do that, I'm going to sit down at this bench for a bit. So the thought process was 24 to 70 would be a good range to start with because it'll give me enough compression to kind of work with as a beginner going into the automotive stuff. And it's not super telephoto because as you get into that telephoto range, prices go up. Tamron didn't have a 24 to 70, they had the 28 to 75, but f2.8, just like the Sigma having an f2.8. So that was nice that it was a fast lens. I would get a good amount of that bokeh and that depth. So one of the side effects of not filming for a very long time is forgetting that your microphone needs a dead cat when it's windy out. And so the remainder of the footage of me on the bench talking about my thoughts is gone with the wind. Haha, get it? So to really condense the thought process that I had, it was a matter of, do I take the cheaper lens that gives me a lesser focal length range, but just enough for what I'd need right now, or go up to a higher focal length and pay the extra money? And then at that end, you have the difference between the 24 to 105 and the 35 to 150 of the Tamron for the same price. So now the question becomes, do I go for that weight and that extra focal length on the top end? And can I even get my hands on one? So one of the experiments that you're about to see right now is me going to the store, going between 100 and 150 of focal length, and then also trying 100 focal length and just stepping forward and backward a couple of feet and seeing what the difference was. As it turns out, there's not that much of a difference between doing the two different things. Fortunately, because I repeat myself a lot, in the next section, I'm gonna end up reviewing and recapping my thoughts anyway, so no need to do it here. I'm very quickly realizing that doing these jump cuts and talking about different parts of my thoughts at different periods of time during my day makes me forget where I left off. How's that for foreshadowing? To summarize my thought process, the Tamron 28-75 f2.8, $900, the cheapest of the four that I've been considering. Probably the more budget-friendly one, the more budget-oriented in terms of build, in terms of quality, in terms of functionality. So that's there. Then there's the Sigma 24-70 f2.8 at $1,100. Has a bit more functionality, hence the higher price. And then also gives you the 24-70 at a really fast lens, f2.8, just like the Tamron. Then there's the Sony 24-105, being $1,400, but it is a G lens. It is $1,400 compared to $1,100 with the Sigma or compared to $900 with the Tamron, but it does have the extra 35 millimeters of focal length. It does have the Sony build and the sort of peace of mind that everything's gonna function the way it should between a Sony body and a Sony lens. Maybe that's not as big of a deal as I'm making it. And then you have the Tamron 35-150, which is pretty much getting unanimously rave reviews, and unanimously, there's only one problem with it, which is the weight of the thing and the size of it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I may have or may have not mentioned, I do intend to use this with a gimbal, and so a heavier lens is obviously going to affect its ability to be balanced. It can still be balanced, I know that. And then the external barrel in pretty much all these lenses makes that a little bit of a thing to think about. That being $1,900. Now, you might, on one hand, say $1,900 is way left field when it comes to the price, but when you consider the focal length that you're getting and how many other lenses it's going to replace, and the fact that for $1,900, Sony lenses, like, you're not getting the same thing for $1,900 with other companies. The 24-105 was the final contender against the Tamron 35-150, and it still felt like I should just go for the 35-150 and call it a day and get that lens that everyone's saying you gotta get this lens. When you look at these two lenses, the Sony is overpriced for what it delivers versus the Tamron for what it delivers. It's pretty much gonna be the Tamron 35-150. And so I got the Sony 24-105. Let me explain. So the contender that came into the arena, the wrench that came into the spokes, if you will, is this. At $1,400, the 24-105 is a bit overpriced for what it delivers, despite having the extra 35 millimeters and being a G lens and being Sony, and you know it's gonna work with the camera, until I was introduced to a very lightly used 24-105, and I'll show you how lightly used it is. There's not a mark on it. I mean, at $1,400 for the 24-105 versus $1,900 for the 35-150, it seems like the better bet until you find a nearly new 24-105 for $900. Now you're talking about a $1,000 price gap. Now, real quick, before I continue my argument, let me just switch over to it real quick. Not really that much different. It is brighter because I don't have an ND filter. This is a 77mm thread from a 67mm, so I don't have an ND, whatever, but it is at an f of 4. I mean, not only did I get, I nearly left the place with just the lens for $900, and the guy at the shop, the owner of the shop, said, let me go and check if I at least have a box for you to go home with. And he found the box with the manual and the hood and the packaging and the bag and everything. So, I mean, theoretically, if I didn't like this lens, I could probably sell it, like, for how much I bought it for, maybe more, who knows. Either way, the more important thing is that this whole endeavor is me trying to abide by the sort of the principle or the advice that a new photographer/videographer should try to find decent glass in the beginning that will allow a wider range of things to be filmed, to be shot, sort of giving you the best bang for the buck. Just based on that alone, it would make the most sense for a person to go for the 35-150. And if that's what a person needs, then for sure that makes the most sense. But if you look at the footage, getting the image to look like a focal length of 150 with the 105 took me stepping forward about 4 feet. Now, the trade-off is, because of the fact that I got this $1,400 lens for $900 instead, that leaves $1,000 in the budget for me to get this. It's so good it knocked the hair off my head. and a little bit off my beard. It also made my shirt a bit brighter. The DJI Ronin Rs3 Pro. Now, I ended up ordering this as the combo pack, which comes with Raven Eye for tracking, as well as a couple of other cables and mounts and whatnot. The point, though, is that because I had decided on a certain budget for the lens, being $1,900 for the Tamron, and then ending up finding the option to get a lens that has a little bit less capability, but was way more affordable, that opened up my budget to be able to fit this as a combo kit into my budget. Now, I had been eyeing gimbals for a while, and I was pretty much settled that I was gonna go with the Zhiyun Weebill 2 or the Weebill 3, which is now out, because that was more affordable and did a majority of what I needed it to do. Then I came across videos and feature presentations of this particular gimbal, and why did I pick this one? Because secretly deep down I did want this one because it's more established, it has slightly better support, slightly more features, which I'm gonna go through in another video, because after opening this thing up I realized I have to do an impressions video, not of deep review because I'm not an expert in this stuff, but definitely the impressions from the perspective of somebody who doesn't know what he's doing. But most importantly, it's carbon fiber. But on a more serious note, there are certain features that this specific gimbal has, the Pro as opposed to the non-Pro, and what this has as opposed to its competitors, that I definitely will get into and talk about more in terms of the functionality that I'm looking for when thinking about the budget that you have and trying to get the most out of the equipment that you get. It's not always just about the immediate equipment that you're using in terms of the camera and lenses. It's about what you can do with the budget you have to get the most things done for a project or projects in general. But anyway, that's the conclusion of this particular adventure. So if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go justify having spent so much money on this purchase. I'm gonna need you to